On the Young Turks, we covered Standing Rock a lot. Jordan Sherrington was there over 7 times. Wes Clark Jr., Michael Wood led the veterans for Standing Rock. When Wes came back, he told us about this company called TigerSwan and how they had private contractors monitoring the protesters. And some of the things that he had reported seemed unbelievable. Well, turns out now they are confirmed by the Intercept. Intercept has done a brilliant piece with, first of all, a leak that they got from a contractor at TigerSwan, plus public documents that they found to find out who these guys are, how they were used, and their unbelievable perception of protesters and how they spread that perception, not only the company involved, but most importantly to law enforcement agencies. So TigerSwan is hired by Energy Transfer Partners to do security and to do analysis of the protesters, or what they call them, the water protectors is what they call themselves. That is not what TigerSwan calls them. So let's go to the Intercept's reporting. Internal TigerSwan communications described the movement as, quote, an ideologically driven insurgency with a strong religious component, and compare the anti-pipeline water protectors to jihadist fighters. What? That's insane. Now, the strong religious component that they're talking about is that the water protectors would go, and their main form of protest was praying. So they were peaceful, and in fact, the local authorities and the private contractors in the beginning, before cameras showed up, would say, oh, these are violent protesters and causing trouble. And then our cameras showed up and showed that they were not at all violent, that what they were doing was praying. Now TigerSwan takes the praying and turns it and goes that it has a strong religious component and compares them to an insurgency and jihadist fighters. That's so mental, it's unbelievable. But if you hire guys who are military guys who worked in the Middle East, then if all you have is a hammer, is all you see is nails. If you're bringing guys who've been fighting jihadis, all they see is jihadis. Even when they're perfectly innocent American citizens doing the most American thing you can do, which is protesting your government and its actions, in this case, to support Energy Transfer Partners as they built that oil pipeline. Now, one report dated February 27th, 2017 states that since the movement, quote, generally followed the jihadist insurgency model while active, we can expect that individuals who fought for and supported it to follow a post-insurgency model after its collapse. So they frame everything from this perspective. They call innocent protesters who are sitting there praying jihadis because they're praying. And then they say, well, look, that movement did not win. Of course, they did get permission to build a pipeline from the Trump administration. But don't worry, Energy Transfer Partners, you have to keep hiring us, paying us a lot of money, because we've got to track these jihadis throughout the country, and they are. So let me give you a little bit of background on TigerSwan. Based in Apex, North Carolina, TigerSwan was created by retired Army Colonel James Reese during the height of the war in Iraq. What they want to do is take some of that lucrative defense contractor money. At the time, Blackwater was getting most of the contracts, and this was very lucrative stuff, and a lot of times no bid. So they're like, hey, if you were a connected insider and you had a bunch of guys who'd already fought in Iraq, you just turn around, pay them a lot more money than the US military can pay them. You get them on your side, and then you turn to the government, and nobody even checks defense contracts. You get millions upon millions, hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes, and it's a good racket, and we just bill the American taxpayer. So TigerSwan now has an estimated 350 employees and maintains offices in Iraq, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, India, Latin America, and Japan. Now, these privatized defense contractors have been unleashed within the United States. What are the results? Well, let's go to internal TigerSwan documents as reported by the Intercept. They explain, while we can expect to see continued spread of the anti-DAPL diaspora, aggressive intelligence preparation of the battlefield and active coordination between intelligence and security elements are now a proven method of defeating pipeline insurgencies. So they continue to call innocent water protectors insurgents. They're not insurgents, they're Americans. but they have all these offices in Iraq, Saudi Arabia, etc. So all they see is insurgents. And they want to scare the hell out of energy transfer partners, anybody who else hires them. Oh, you need security. These are guys are like jihadis. There's no violence on their side. Again, we showed video on the Young Turks. You can see it on TYT Politics right now, where they say, oh, the water protectors started fires. And then you see actually the cops that fire the materials that actually land on the water protector side and then start a fire. So it's just the insinuation that they're violent is absolutely preposterous. And look at the way that they are describing the area that where they're protesting as a battlefield. Okay, the leaked documents include situation reports prepared by TigerSwan operatives in North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Illinois, and Texas between September 2016 and May 2017, and delivered to energy transfer partners. So this is not just in North Dakota, it's in 5 different states. They offer a daily snapshot of the securities firm's activities, including detailed summaries of the previous day's surveillance targeting pipeline opponents, intelligence on upcoming protests, and information harvested from social media. The documents also provide extensive evidence of aerial surveillance and radio eavesdropping, as well as infiltration of camps and activist circles. So that's exactly what Wes Clark was talking about here on the Young Turks when he came back from Standing Rock. So yeah, they're looking at the protesters on the ground. Yes, they're looking at their social media and tracking it. And as you see from the documents, ironically, religiously so. And then they've got the aerial footage from drones, but they also infiltrate, pretending to be protesters, and meanwhile collecting data on the people who are exercising their First Amendment rights. Included among the documents obtained via public records requests were daily intelligence updates developed by TigerSwan that were shared with law enforcement officers, thus contributing to a broad public-private intelligence dragnet. In the internal situation reports, TigerSwan operatives comment frequently about their routine coordination and intelligence sharing with law enforcement. Unfortunately, a lot of the law enforcement, including FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and a lot of the local sheriff's office cooperate with these guys and coordinate with them. So then you don't even know who's working for you anymore. Because remember, these guys are private contractors. They work for the pipeline company. They don't work for us, the American citizens. The cops are supposed to work for us, the citizens. The FBI is supposed to work for us. We pay their salaries. But they go and turn around and merge the private and public, basically security interests. And all of a sudden they co-opt the guys that we're paying that are supposed to represent us and protect us. And all of a sudden those guys are working for the pipeline. That's not how our law enforcement is supposed to work. Now, there was only a few local police that stood up to TigerSwan and said, no, thank you, we're not interested in that. Some counties in Iowa actually did not want to cooperate with TigerSwan. They didn't think that was appropriate. They were absolutely right. TigerSwan was very frustrated by that and talked about how they should do propaganda in those counties to convince the local police to work with them as law enforcement in other parts of the country were. Back to the Intercept's reporting here, the leaked situation reports indicate that during the company's first weeks working on the pipeline, TigerSwan operatives met with law enforcement in Iowa, North Dakota, including Sheriff Dean Danzison of Mercer County, North Dakota, who, quote, agreed to sharing of information. You're not supposed to share information with private contractors. They don't work for the citizens. They work for a private pipeline. When the corporations merge with the government, that has a name, and it's an unfortunate name. We don't want to go in that direction. It's called fascism. Okay, by September 13th, the documents indicate TigerSwan had placed a liaison inside the law enforcement, quote, Joint Operation Command in North Dakota. The fusion of public and private intelligence operations targeting water protectors was underway. So they co-opted the taxpayers' money and law enforcement to work against the citizens on behalf of private corporations. So, and by the way, do we all share the profits of those private corporations? No, 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 no. They take all the profits and they give some of it to TigerSwan, but they don't share any of it with us. And then we have to pay the cops that are basically working for them to oppress our own citizens. This is grotesque. The documents reveal the existence of a now persons of interest list, as well as other databases that include identifying information such as photographs and license plate numbers. They made a list of persons of interest. These are American citizens exercising their literally most American right there is. The right to protest, freedom of speech, and freedom of the press as well. And what do? They surveil them, they take their pictures, they take their license plates, and sometimes they would track them. One of the persons who was on the list said, yeah, every time I went out, there was always a car that was trailing me. And I thought, how did they even know that I was gonna get in my car, that I was gonna drive somewhere, let alone tail me? This is not how America is supposed to work. This is a police state, and it's not even a public police state, it's a private police state. TigerSwan's internal reports and the intelligence briefings shared with law enforcement named dozens of DAPL opponents. Some of those named are well-known activists, while others have minimal public affiliation with the water protector movement. According to an October 16th document obtained via the records request, the security team's responsibilities included collecting, quote, information of an evidentiary level that would ultimately, quote, aid in prosecution of protesters. So not only are they collecting information on the protesters, but they then go over to law enforcement and say, now prosecute these guys. For what? For what? I don't know, it doesn't matter. They are persons of interest. They are insurgents, possible jihadis. So we're gonna put these guys in jail because they're in the way of our profits. You really think this is how America is supposed to work? The same document describes plans to continue building person of interest folders in coordination with law enforcement intelligence. TigerSwan situation reports also describe conversations between the company's operatives and FBI agents on at least 4 occasions. Hey, FBI, local law enforcement, you don't work for Energy Transfer Partners. You don't work for the Dakota Access Pipeline. You don't work for TigerSwan. You work for us, American citizens. Anyone who's involved in this that is actually paid by the taxpayers, there should be a thorough investigation of, and they need to be explained how America works. We don't track our own citizens like we're East Germany, or we're like some sort of fascist state, and you don't do it on our dime. The situation reports also suggest that TigerSwan attempted a counter-information campaign by creating and distributing content critical of the protests on social media. They openly brag about how they claim the other side is doing propaganda. No, they're doing protests, that's what they're supposed to do. Then they go in and ironically do propaganda of their own, TigerSwan does, and then they go, oh no, we're just countering their propaganda. Those are, what propaganda? They don't have any money. They could barely get there and they could barely maintain the campsite. What propaganda? You guys are the ones with the money that go and create fake accounts, which again, the Intercept showed through the internal documents. So let me give you more on that. The article, this article is only, this is now a part of the explanation from TigerSwan, their report from October 3rd. They explain basically the Energy Transfer Partners, don't worry. This article, the one that they're referring to that was against Dakota Access Pipeline, is only in the Huffington Post, but the expansion of the tribe's narrative outside of Native American community media outlets is of concern. TigerSwan agents regularly describe protesters' account of events as propaganda. They're like, it's only in Huffington Post, but it could get worse. I mean, God, if they found out what we're actually doing up here, that would be terrible. I mean, we're just trying to counter their propaganda. And so, now those are real people that they were tracking. Themselves, they set up fake accounts. Because what are you gonna do? You're gonna say, yeah, I'm TigerSwan, I'm the new Pinkertons, and my job is to track innocent Americans and then try to get them arrested? You're not gonna say that. So they came up with fake groups online called Defend Iowa. Well, Iowa didn't want your defense. And in fact, law enforcement in Iowa were among the few that stood up to you. So who the hell are you talking about saying defend Iowa? You're not from Iowa. You're a private contractor doing this for profit. Another group was Netizens for Progress and Justice. Well, doesn't that sound nice? Okay, they were for neither progress nor justice. One of the guys who was doing this, he started putting up these amateurish videos. And once the Intercept contacted them and saying, hey, don't you work for TigerSwan? And you're pretending to be a regular citizen here with a different name, and you made up this group, so can you tell us all about that? Boom, radio silence. Not only does that guy not respond to the Intercept, all of a sudden they take down all the videos. Oh really, what happened now? So in fact, of course, you were doing propaganda, and you weren't doing it because you were interested in progress or justice, you were doing it for cold hard cash. Okay, here's another TigerSwan situation report. They say of most concern when they were tracking the protesters were the, quote, Earth First magazines found on the camp. These magazines promote and provide tactics, techniques, and procedures for violent activity. Now they have to say that the protesters are violent to justify all the money that Energy Transfer Partners is paying TigerSwan for security and their analysis of security. So they go on to say, exploitation of ongoing native versus non-native rifts and tribal rifts between peaceful and violent elements is critical in our effort to delegitimize the anti-DAPL movement. In other words, their agitators that have now infiltrated the camps go and try to create rifts where rifts did not exist, to split up the groups, to get them to start fighting. And they mention that there are peaceful protesters. They go, but let's get them started to fight. And they have no evidence to back up their violent element claim, but they have to, of course, say that. But isn't that amazing? They've spent money to make sure that they are pretending to be protesters. And so the next time you're in one of these protests, you also have to think, if someone's starting a fight, do they genuinely believe that? Is that their heartfelt opinion? Or are they a private contractor meant to create and sow chaos in your camps to split you up? So it is a tactic that they use, and now their internal documents confirm. TigerSwan, this is more from their own documents. TigerSwan collection teams will make contact with event organizers to embed within the structure of the demonstration to develop a trusted agent status to be cultivated for future collection efforts. Now, the Intercept explains, TigerSwan pays particular attention to protesters of Middle Eastern descent. A September 22nd situation report argues that the presence of additional Palestinians in the camp and the movement's involvement with Islamic individuals is a dynamic that requires further examination. What? That's a random Palestinian American dude who went to go protest. The Intercept talked to him and he's like, Palestinians care about indigenous rights, so I went to go support indigenous rights here in America. He's a Palestinian American. They're like, oh my God, it's a Middle Easterner, jihadi. Pay even more attention to him. He's brown, he's an Arab. And that's not the only guy that they tracked because they were Middle Eastern. Cass County Sheriff's Deputy Tanya Johnner emailed several other officers, including 2 FBI agents, with an overview of information provided by company intel. The information pertained to a woman whom Johnner labeled as, quote, a strong Shia Islamic, with, quote, a strong female Shia following. The woman had, quote, made several trips overseas. Now they're looking into where you went overseas. What does it mean to be a strong Shia Islamic? I don't know what that means. Did she do anything that is wrong? Did she do anything right? No. Do you have any history of that? If they had history of it, believe me, they would write it endlessly. No, the main charge against her is she's Shia Islamic. If all you have is a hammer, all you see is nails. So these guys have been private contractors all over the Middle East fighting what they call jihadis. God knows if those are actual jihadis or not. There certainly are real jihadis in the Middle East, and then others that look like them. And so they come here, what do they see? They see the same thing. Well, brown-skinned person, jihadi. That's a strong Islamic, Shia Islamic over there. Oh, that's a Palestinian, watch out for them. And the company intel is given to law enforcement. Now all of a sudden law enforcement and the FBI are looking out for the Islamics. This is absolute insanity. Now the end is not any better here, it gets worse. TigerSwan consistently describes the peaceful demonstrators using military and tactical language more appropriate for counterterrorism operations in an armed conflict zone. At times, the military language verges on parody, as when agents write of protesters, quote, stockpiling signs, or when they discuss the, quote, caliber of paintball pellets. More often, however, the way that TigerSwan discusses protesters as, quote, terrorists. Their direct actions as, quote, attacks, and the camps as, quote, a battlefield, reveals how the protesters' dissent was not only criminalized, but treated as a national security threat. They're calling innocent American protesters terrorists. then they're coordinating with law enforcement and building a list of persons of interest that they then target not only during active protests, but continue to this day. They're tracking those people. Why? They got to keep getting paid. So they keep telling energy transfer partners, no, this is a serious situation in the battlefield. And so keep paying me and I'm going to keep tracking these terrorists that are actually exercising their First Amendment rights. A March 1 report states that protesters, quote, operational weakness allows TigerSwan elements to further develop and dictate the battle space. This is gross. Sickening that this is happening inside the United States. In one internal report dated May 4th, this is way after the pipeline is approved, a TigerSwan operative describes an effort to amass digital and ground intelligence that would allow the company to, quote, find, fix, and eliminate threats to the pipeline. An eerie echo of find, fix, finish, a military term used by special forces in the US government's assassination campaign against terrorist targets. We can't let these lunatics operate like inside the United States as if the entire country is a battlefield and people who are exercising their rights are jihadis. So I don't know how we put an end to this, but the first and most important thing in the beginning is awareness. Brilliant job by the Intercept to find these documents. Here's another one. TigerSwan operative says, everyone must be concerned of the lone wolf. Should we slip from that conscience, we may all be amiss. Meaning that there are no more protests, but I got to keep tracking every protester that I put on the list, and you got to keep paying me for that because one of them could be a lone wolf. A lone wolf what? A lone wolf protester? That would make him an American. Now, by the way, of course, this is all for corporate interests. If you're a Tea Party protester, there ain't nobody tracking you because you're pro-corporations. You come out there and go, yeah, take away our health care, give it to private companies. Then nobody tracks you. Then you're happily doing propaganda for the private interests and you don't go on any list. But if you actually care about citizens and trying to protect them, trying to protect the water, trying to protect your community, then you go on a list. In recent week, the company's role has expanded to include the surveillance of activist networks marginally related to the pipeline, with TigerSwan agents monitoring, quote, anti-Trump protests from Chicago to Washington, D.C., as well as warning its client of growing dissent around other pipelines across the country. So now it gets broader and broader, and if you're protesting Trump, now you go on a different list. When will this end? This is how you lose a democracy. Final quote is from another TigerSwan operative. They say, much like Afghanistan and Iraq, the fighting season will soon be here with the coming warm temperatures. No, North Dakota is not like Afghanistan or Iraq. There are no jihadis there. There are no insurgents, there are no terrorists. Those are us, American citizens. And it's not fighting season unless you make it fighting season. And if you treat us as some sort of insurgency and you militarize these corporations now, before they had runaway rights, they had corporate rights, then they wound up having human being constitutional rights, which is so insane. And now they are weaponized. These corporations have run absolutely amok. If we don't get control over them, they're going to get control over us. And now they've brought in these private contractors to literally get control over us with weapons and to take over our law enforcement and to declare us persons of interest and begin to figure out how they could put us in jail. This is disgusting, and it's one of the most un-American things I have ever seen. You don't like ads? I hear you, brother. You know how you can avoid ads for the Young Turks? Become a Young Turks member and get all the content ad-free. tytnetwork.com/join.